shout out to Bishop Foreman for inviting me into your church today. He's a good man.
Hey, listen, it is Bishop Kevin Foreman, the People's Bishop, pastor of Harvest Church and leader of the Harvest Leadership Network. Super, uber excited today to bring you today's video and audio leadership podcast for the month of November 2021. Now, we've heard from so many of you saying, Bishop, what's going on with the leadership podcast? Where have you been? What's happening? Well, guess what? I intentionally was silent as it related to our leadership podcast for just a little bit, because I actually want to use it as a basis from which I'm going to give you today's leadership talk, because today we're going to talk about the silent leader. We're going to talk about the silent leader. Do me this favor, though, before we jump into it. I want you to share this with as many people as possible. You know that anything I bring to you is going to speak life into your life. In fact, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help leaders go further, faster. The Harvest Leadership Network, which is the network that I lead, full of churches and pastors and business owners, leaders, and all of the spheres of society, arts and entertainment, business, education, family, government, media, and church. It's filled with like-minded leaders. And I want to encourage you to get connected to the Harvest Leadership Network. At the time that this podcast is being released, it is absolutely no cost for you to get connected. So many great resources, so many great benefits you can find out about. You can just simply text that right there on the screen. Matter of fact, it's going to scroll for a little bit. Text leadership to 877-552-4746. And when you do that, you're going to be able to connect and get more information about the Harvest Leadership Network. Let me say this. If this podcast blesses you, be a blessing. Share it with others, as I already mentioned, and leave a 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you receive your podcast. We want to continue to know that we bring great content to you, and we want to hear from you that it is a blessing for you. And I got to say this before we jump in. If you don't have that Harvest Church app, what are you doing? Seriously, get the app. You can stay connected to all things Bishop Foreman, all things Harvest Church, original worship, music, messages, podcasts. Every time I go live, you'll be notified. You're going to get a midweek motivation, a Saturday devotion. Like literally, we're going to give you something every single day of the week that's going to speak life into your life. Matter of fact, let me show you what you're missing out on. Watch this.
Your mobile phone is with you 24/7, and now Harvest is too. We've released the 2021 version of the Harvest app on Apple and Android. The Harvest app is full of resources to help you connect with Harvest and with God. Watch and listen to Bishop's life-giving messages, listen to Harvest worship music, check out and register for events, read the Bible, connect on social media, watch live, and give inside the app. There are so many new features all in one single place. Download it today in the Apple App Store, Google Play, or text the word Harvest to 877-552-4746 to get it.
I'm telling you, what are you doing? Get the app. If you don't have it, shoot a text over to Harvest. The word Harvest to 877-552-4746. That's the new number. If you've been connected for a while, you know that we've transitioned from the short code number, short code number, there we go, to the longer 877, the toll-free number. We did that so that all of the people connected to Harvest internationally will be able to utilize the toll-free number, all right? So we want you to get connected and make sure that you get our app. It's totally free on Android devices and Apple devices. And for those of you on Android, I am praying for you. Now, real talk, let me just say this before we get into today's leadership talk. I was seriously considering going to the dark side. Bishop, what do you mean the dark side? Well, I consider Android devices the dark side. Don't be offended. It's just I am an Apple loyalist, but I got to be honest, Apple has been going through some changes and things haven't been working. So if you've been staying connected, you know that for a while there, I was considering swapping over, and I may still do it. So it may become that Apple is the dark side and Android is on God's side. We just got to see what's going to happen. One more thing before we get into today's leadership talk. If you've got a praise report of how God is working in your life, I want to hear it, especially for those of you that are part of the Leadership Network. I want to hear how God is working in your life. I want to hear how God uses Harvest and the various things Harvest does, Harvest Church, Harvest Bible College, the Leadership Network, our foundation, all of the things that Harvest does. I want to know how that blesses you and how that's having an impact on your life. So just go to in our app. You can leave us a praise report and just let us know how God is working. I want to rejoice with you. Let me tell you something. As a leader, sometimes it's a lonely walk. And you need to know you've got somebody that's rooting for you, cheering for you, that believes in you and the potential that God's placed on the inside of you. Well, let me just tell you, Bishop Foreman does. And I want to hear how God's working in your life. Listen, guys. Today, I want to talk from this subject for just a few moments for today's leadership talk for our podcast, the silent leader. Dum, 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 dum. What do you mean the silent leader? There are some times in your life as a leader where there's going to be silence. Sometimes you're going to need to be silent, number one. Number two, sometimes it's going to feel like God is silent, number two. And then sometimes there's a time for you to come from silence. I want to look at a few scriptures and I want to extract some leadership principles from them. We're going to start in Mark chapter 14. I want to read you some verses, and I'm intentionally not going to have the verses placed on the screen as you've seen from some of our past video podcasts, because I want to encourage you to hear them and I want to encourage you to look at them also for yourself. All right. So if you're listening or you're watching the video, if you can bring it up in the Harvest app, you can bring the Bible up. I want you to look at these scriptures. In Mark chapter 14, verse 53, it says, and they led Jesus to the high priest. Now, to give you context, they're trying to now find something wrong with Jesus. And I want you to listen to what happens because they're looking for a reason to have him executed. As a leader, listen to me, you have to get comfortable being in the seat where people fault find. You have to be okay with being in the seat where people are looking for something wrong, even if there isn't. Mark 14, verse 53. And they led Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and elders and scribes came together. And Peter had followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards and warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death. Pay attention. They had already decided what they wanted to do. And for a leader, you have to know when you're dealing with someone who you can influence and someone who's already decided. One of the greatest things you could do as a leader in business, as a leader in the seven spheres of society, arts and entertainment, business, education, family, government, media, and church, one of the greatest things you could do is be mindful of where someone really is, because these people had already decided. They were seeking testimony to back up what they already believed. They didn't want to learn anything from Jesus. They had decided, so they were looking for something negative to say about Jesus. Look at me, leader. That comes with the territory. Don't think it's strange. Don't think something is wrong. Don't think, oh my God, why are these people doing that? If they did it to Jesus, they're going to do it to you. And it doesn't matter what sphere of society. This isn't just for church leaders. This is for any type of leader. They were looking for testimony because they had already decided they wanted to put him to death. Let's listen and let's go a little further. It says this, for verse 56, for many, let me back up because I want to get this last part of this verse. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death. Here's the last part, but they found none. They could find nothing negative to say that was worthy of what they already believed. As a leader, you're going to be talked about. Get over it. You're going to be lied on. Get over it. People are going to say things that are not true. Get over it. People that you thought got you, you're going to discover didn't really get you. Get over it. Because who was there watching while they were doing this? Peter. And Peter never interjected to fight for him. As a leader, you have to realize sometimes the people that should fight for you will not. You have to be okay with that. Let's keep reading. Verse 57, or verse 56 rather. For many bore false witness against, you can put your name right there. For many bore false witness against Bob. For many bore false witness against Karen. For many bore false witness against Sheila. For many bore false witness against John. For many bore false witness against him. but their testimony did not agree, which means they couldn't even get their stories to line up. I need for you as a leader to be okay that sometimes when you have opposition, it doesn't even line up. You may be dealing with government entities or business entities, and one person tells you this, another person tells you this, one person says this, another person says that. That's part of the journey of being a leader. I need you to realize you are well able. Can you type that in the comments or open your mouth and say it if you're listening? I am well able. If you're sitting in the seat, you are well able to deal with what comes with the seat of leadership. All right. Let's go further. It says, verse 57, and some stood up and bore false witness against him, said, we heard him say, I will destroy the temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands. Yet even about this testimony, they did not agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst of Jesus and said this, here it is, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? Listen, but he remained silent. Wow, 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 wow. He remained silent. Can you type that on the screen? Remain silent. Why would Jesus not open his mouth to defend himself? You got people lying. You got people going on, saying all kind of crazy stuff, and they can't even agree. I want you to listen. But he remained silent and made no answer. Why? Because these people were already committed to not believing anything he said in the first place. Sometimes as a leader, you have to accept that there are people who are not going to like you, not going to be okay with you, that are going to be flip-flop, wishy-washy. It comes with the seat. And sometimes the best thing to do is to simply be silent. Now, I know, listen, when you're a leader, the first thing you want to do is defend yourself. Oh, no, I'm going to shoot an email. Oh, no, I'm going to shoot a text. But what if you getting involved in answering lies, watch me, broke the focus from your assignment? You cannot answer every lie. Guess what? These are the only things we know they said. What about all the other things that we don't even know what the people said? You cannot spend your time answering every lie because there's a lot of them. You cannot, and remember, these are people who didn't even know the Lord. You cannot spend your time chasing every single accusation because it will distract you from your assignment. Jesus knew in this moment, he knew what he had to do. So he said, there's no use in even dealing with this because you all have already decided what you want to believe. So I will not let your accusation and your antagonization distract me from my assignment. Type this, I will not be distracted. Come on. I will not be distracted. If we keep looking, it goes on. It says he remained silent, verse 61, and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? That's a different question. See, sometimes we like to put everything together. And in that moment, Jesus did not remain silent. He answers because he's being asked a different question. He says, are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah? Are you the Christos in Greek, the anointed one? Are you this guy, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus says, I am. And you will see the Son of Man. That just means God born of a woman or born of a woman, seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. He answered that because that was a very different question. He was silent when he knew there was nothing to win. When it was appropriate to speak to assert who he was, he spoke. He didn't deal with who they said he wasn't. He did answer with what he knew and who he knew that he was. That's sometimes it's appropriate to remain silent because there's no win in speaking. Wow. Okay. The silent leader. Now, let's look at this. What do you do when you feel like God is silent? What do you do when you feel like I'm a leader, I'm praying, I'm worshiping, I'm giving, I'm serving, I'm praying, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and it feels like God is silent? Listen to me. When it feels like God is silent as a leader, that is because your leadership is currently being tested. Come on. When you feel like God is silent as a leader, that is because your leadership is currently being tested. Are you going to be able to use what you've learned in order to lead even when I'm silent? In the military, there is a basic protocol that simply says you follow the last directive, the last order until you get a new one. Sometimes you don't get a new order from God, fresh direction from God, fresh clarity from God, because he wants you to fully carry out what he's already said to do. The teacher cannot talk during the test. I need you to type that. The teacher cannot talk during the test. So in Isaiah chapter 42, we're going to read down to verse 14. And there's a principle I want to extract from it. And again, remember, I'm not going to put the scriptures on the screen because I want you to bring them up in the Harvest app, or if you got a Bible there, bring them up that way. But I want you to see these for yourself, because there's going to be revelation you're going to get when you see it for yourself. It says, I, the Lord, have been silent. I'm reading Amplified for a long time. Look, God's like, I know I haven't said anything. I know I haven't said anything. I have been still and restrained myself. Listen to the next part. Now I will moan like a woman in labor. I will gasp and pant. Stop. God says, I've been silent, but now I'm ready to take action. Whenever you feel like God has been silent, your leadership is being tested. God wants to see if you're going to follow the last directive until you get a new one. But then when he does speak, he is going to take action. And that action, watch me, will feel like, literally, he describes it as, I will moan like a woman in labor. He says, when I do speak, it's going to be like a labor. In other words, when I was silent, not only were you tested, but I was making sure I could trust you for what I will birth in you next. Whoo! Come on, leader. Do not allow what seems like God's silence to make you shut down, shut off, shut up, shut the door, stop. God says, I just need to see if I can trust you, because I will birth something new in you. And when I birth something new in you, it'll be like a woman in labor pains. Now, let's go here. What happens when it's you that's silent? We've talked about when you should be silent when accusations. We've talked about when it seems like God is silent. Let's talk about this. What happens when you don't know what to say as a leader? Let me give you an example. In Luke chapter 1, the BSB version, it says this. One day while Zechariah's, this verse 8, the vision was on duty, he was serving as a priest before God. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid. An angel appears and says to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah, because your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you are to give him the name John. This is not normal, because in the Hebrew culture, you would have named him after the father. So you're going to name him something different. Now pay attention, leader. The angel's telling him your prayer has been answered. This is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. Your prayer has been answered. Look at verse 18. How can I be sure of this? Zechariah asked the angel. I'm an old man and my wife is well along in years. What? The angel just told you your prayer is answered. As the leader, he's a priest. He's a priest. He's a man of God. He's a leader. He's a husband. He's a leader of his family. He's a leader. And when the angel says, this is it, your prayer has been answered, you know what he says? Well, how can I be sure? What? Sometimes, listen to this next verse, God will silence you. Listen to this, verse 20. And now you will be silent and unable to speak until the day this comes to pass, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled at their proper time. Why would God do that? Because he didn't want him as the leader to curse what had just been spoken, to curse what had just been released by the angel. Sometimes as a leader, you feel like, I just don't know what to say. I have anything to say. Sometimes it's because God says, I don't want you to mess up what I'm about to manifest. I need you to embrace the moments where sometimes you would normally say, I got to say something. And there's silence. Maybe God doesn't want you speaking negative. He doesn't want you bleeding on your team. He doesn't want you bleeding on who you lead. He doesn't want you being negative. Sometimes as a leader, you're going to have moments and urges where you just, I'm silent. I'm silent. And I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything to say. Embrace that, because maybe that is God saying to you, don't curse this. Don't mess this up. Last thing for today's leadership talk. When is it time not to be silent? You ready? When it's time to fulfill your assignment. In Acts chapter 18, the Apostle Paul is in a city called Corinth. And I'm going to read you a couple of verses. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, This is Acts 18 and verse number 9. And the Lord said to Paul, remember, I'm not putting the scriptures up because I want you to pull it up in the Harvest app. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, do not be afraid, but go on speaking, and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people. And he stayed 1 year and 6 months teaching the word of God to them. Look at me, leader. You should not be silent when it is time for you to fulfill your assignment. Sometimes, you ready? This is almost going to seem totally opposite of what I just said. Sometimes as a leader, fear creeps in, and you're not speaking, not because of some spiritual conviction, not because you don't want to say something negative. You're not speaking because you're fearful. You're not active because you are fearful. You're fearful. You're fearful of what's going on, what's going to happen, what it's going to be. And as a leader, you have to lead, but you can't lead from a place of fear. You have to lead, and you cannot be silent. Wow. Mind blown. For some of you leaders, you're like, oh, I'm just so nervous. I'm so scared. I'm so fearful. Leaders lead with their voice. Leaders lead with their voice. And sometimes what the enemy wants you to do is he wants fear to get you so that you are silent and you don't speak. I gave you 4 different scenarios about silence. I want you to pray over those and figure out when you need to use those, how you need to use those. Because sometimes you'll feel like the silent leader. Listen, God, I pray for this amazing, incredible, world-changing, history-making, curse-breaking leader. I pray that the last 2 months of 2021 are better for them than the first 10 months in what they lead and who they are. I speak life into them, God. I pray that if they're dealing with issues and challenges and frustrations and circumstances, I speak life into them. I speak fresh fight into them right now in Jesus' name. Listen, guys, if today's podcast has blessed you, go back, listen to it, share it with somebody, leave that 5-star review. And I need for you to make sure that you sow. When you sow, you help us to continue to change lives across America and around the world. One of the easiest ways to sow, just go to the website right there on the screen, harvestchurch.church/give. You can use the Cash App. That's $ Bishop Foreman with the number 2 at the end as of the time of this podcast. I have to say that because Cash App, if you've ever used Cash App, there's so many leaders, organizations, businesses that have experienced issues with Cash App. So I have to say at the time of this recording that, if you find any issue with that, we'll keep updating that. But I have to say that. Listen, again, if you don't have our app, get our app. We'd love for you to stay connected. I just want to do things that speak life into your life and help you see results in every single thing that you do. Much love to you. Share this, and we'll be back on schedule. But I wanted to use that brief period of silence to reintroduce the podcast to you and to introduce this concept of the silent leader. Can't wait to see